Joining me now is my buddy, Bill Federer. Bill, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, Brannon, great to be with you.
Give us a quick history here of the Panama Canal.
Yeah, so you had Columbus landing there in the 1500s, 1502. He actually tried to cross it, but he was too ill, and then the Indians attacked. 1534, King of Spain, Charles V, surveyed the Isthmus of Panama, found it was only 50 miles across, and they talked about it because the Spanish were sailing through the Strait of Magellan in 1520, quite a long alternative route. You had somebody in England named Sir Thomas Browne in 1658 talked about a way to get across the canal, the Panama. Scotland, interestingly enough, had the Darien scheme, right? We have the Darien Gap there, but it was 1698, the Scottish got control of Panama and Colombia, and they were attempting a trade colony, but the Spanish cut them off, and they didn't. And then the British East India Company cut them off. They didn't want Scotland to be a part of a global thing. Jefferson suggested a canal in 1788. Another Spanish explorer, Simon Bolivar, 1827, talked about it. But then you had France. So the French did the Suez Canal. And the French said, hey, we can do a canal across the isthmus. First, they attempted a railroad, and then a canal. It didn't work primarily because of malaria. So it's tropical, swampy, and even Ulysses S. Grant, when he was a captain, the California Gold Rush, 1849, was going on, and we were sending troops there, but we didn't have a railroad across the country, and they would go around South America. But in 1848, you had Ulysses S. Grant crossing with the 4th Infantry to get to San Francisco, and a whole lot of his men died. He said the horrors of the road in the rainy season are beyond description. We tried building a railroad. We had 1855, and 5,000 lives were lost building the railroad. Mark Twain had been there in 1868. He says the Panama Railroad was an American project. We took the train at Panama, clattered for 2 or 3 hours through a tangled wilderness of tropical vegetation, and discharged ourselves at Aspinwall, which is called Cologne. It's only 45 miles. The little road has carried about 100,000 passengers for California steamers during the past 12 months. It was a hard road to build. The tropical fevers slaughtered the laborers wholesale. It is a popular saying that every railroad tie from Panama to the other side, Aspinwall, rests upon a corpse. It is claimed that this small railroad enterprise cost the lives of 10,000 men. It is possible. So again, then from railroads, we go to canals. In 1869, the French attempted to build one. But again, you had mudslides, you had the tropical diseases, and the French company went bankrupt. They wanted to do a sea level canal. But they had 25,000 people, French people, killed of malaria and yellow fever. And so you had Teddy Roosevelt. We helped Panama get independent of Colombia. And then we purchased the land and we began to build. We were having lots die, but Dr. Walter Reed, the Walter Reed Medical Center is named after him. He was a U.S. Army physician in 1899. He, after the Spanish-American War, he confirmed that malaria was carried by mosquitoes. And so we developed pesticides like DDT, and we eradicated the malaria. They had people in Africa saying, hey, bring the DDT over to Africa and help eradicate malaria, but all the environmentalists are racists. And they said, no, good for us, not for you. You're going to have to suffer with malaria. And anyway, so the Walter Reed Medical Center, again, was named for him. 1903 is when Orville and Wilbur Wright had their first controlled flight, but that's was when the idea came to purchase the canal zone, which we did in 1904 for $250,000, and or actually 10 million plus an annual payment of $250,000. It was planned by McKinley, but the construction was under Teddy Roosevelt. Instead of a sea level canal, it goes up 3 locks across Gatun Lake and then down 3 locks to the other side. Now, I'm probably the only guest you'll have on that actually went through the canal zone locks and across Gatun Lake before it was given away to Panama.
Really?
So I went to college in 1976 and in Dallas, and one of my classmates, his father was the lieutenant governor of the canal zone. Huh. And so in 1977, we went down to the canal zone, and he arranged for us to get on a Norwegian ship. So the sea captains would go across the ocean, but the canal, there's a rainy season and a dry season. Rainy season, the Gatun Lake fills up with water, but every time you open the locks on either side, you're letting water out of the lake. And as the dry season comes, the canals are lower level, and you have to know the subterranean terrain. And there was actually a ship that was going through, and it hit some ground, and it bent the shaft, and it took like 2 years in dry dock to melt the shaft and get it back into place. And so it was very, very skillful. They have what they call the mules, where they tie these cables to the boats and bring them into the lock. And there was only like 6 inches of space on either side way back then. But we went through the locks. It was beautiful. In the middle of the lake, Gatun Lake, there is a Smithsonian Island where all the tropical creatures ran up to the top of it with all these Komodo dragons and all these things. And it's a high concentration of very rare birds, and it's a neat place. But the people in Panama loved America. They did not want the canal given away. The Americans brought money, and they brought stability. There was Torrijos, who was not elected. He seized power in a coup, and yet Jimmy Carter decided to give away the canal zone. And when Howard Phillips was a friend of mine, this was his big issue, because he found out that you had New York banks had lent money to Panama that they couldn't pay back, and that we were giving away the canal zone, their independence, and the U.S. didn't just give it away. We subsidized it and continued to subsidize it with millions of dollars, and then the Panama would turn around and pay back the New York banks. But the money never even leaves America. It just goes from the government to the New York banks. It doesn't even go to Panama. And so now we found out that whenever you give money to foreign countries, it's money laundering. So billions of dollars to Ukraine, Zelensky keeps a portion of it. The rest of it gets funneled back to Democrats, even like the Clinton Foundation. Mm-hmm. The poorest country in Europe is Ukraine. And when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she was funneling money to Ukraine. Guess what the number one country in Europe giving money to the Clinton Foundation was? Ukraine. Here's the poorest country maxing out to the Clinton. Where are they getting the money? From Clinton. She's funneling the money over there. There's never been any accounting of who gets it. And then some of it goes to military contractors. And then a lot of the congressmen own stock in these companies, and they benefit from that. And anyway, so Panama, the people loved America. But Jimmy Carter had basically belonged to the Rockefellers and the globalists and the Trilateral Commission, and they were pulling all the strings, and they got given away. And now, once we gave it away, there were countries and companies that offered to run it. And American companies, Dutch, the Japanese, but the Chinese, and they're the ones that came in and would bribe people under the table to get it the same way that they're bribing countries to do their China Silk Road initiative. And so the problem is they did build in 2016 these enormous locks, But there's only so much water in Gatun Lake, and so it's draining the lake faster, so it's fewer ships can go through during the dry season. But the Hutchison-Whampoa Company, it's a Chinese CCP-controlled company. They've been buying up strategic naval spots around the world. They built a huge deep water port in the Bahamas, in the Dardanelles, a lot of the military choke points around the world. They've been very systematically taking control of them. And meanwhile, America has been falling behind.
Wow.
So, but thank you to Jimmy Carter for giving that away.
Also, well, I do think we need to get it back. I do think we need to get it back for our national security, because we don't need China or any other country controlling our trade route. Plus, we built it, and our lives, a lot of our guys' lives were lost building it. So I think we need to get it back. Closing comment?
I love the quote from Ronald Reagan. He's debating Jimmy Carter, and he said, March 31st, 1976, he said, well, the canal zone is not a colonial possession. It is not a long-term lease. It is sovereign United States territories, every bit the same as Alaska and the states that were carved from the Louisiana Purchase. We bought it, we paid for it, we built it, and we intend to keep it. That was Ronald Reagan. There was a great movie that just came out.
That's right.
With John Voight and Dennis Quaid. So I encourage people to see that.
Absolutely.
But AmericanMinute.com is my website. And I have a whole post on the whole history of the Panama Canal there. This is a quote from Admiral Thomas Moorer, Moorer, and he stated in the New American, March 29th, 1999. Chinese are poised to effectively take control of the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal, very close to home, is one of our most vital commercial military assets. 1996, China was illegally pouring millions of dollars into Clinton's reelection effort. It was also funneling huge amounts of cash to Panamanian politicians to ensure that one of its front companies, Hutchison-Whampoa of Hong Kong, could move in when we vacate. 1997, Panama secretly turned over the American-built port facility at Balboa, I've been there, which controls shipping on the Pacific side, and Cristobal, which controls shipping on the Atlantic side, to Hutchison-Whampoa. We are scheduled to turn over Rodman Naval Station, Howard Air Force Base, and other important military facilities to Panama, which has given Hutchison-Whampoa the options on these leases. President Clinton may say, again, this is Admiral Moorer, that they are our friends, allies, but Chinese military Communist Party literature referred to the United States as their main enemy. And then he goes on, despite what Henry Kissinger and the media may tell you about reform in China, it is still run by brutal, totalitarian communist regime that will harm us if and when they think they can get the better of us.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's
anyway,
why we don't need to have them around. We don't need to have them controlling the Panama Canal. We need to get it back. We need to get it back. AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. Historian Bill Federer tonight on the history of the Panama Canal. I learned some stuff tonight. I'm sure you did as well. Hey, Bill, thank you as always, and Happy New Year.
Well, thank you, Brannon, and blessings to your family and all the viewers.
You too. Bill Federer checking in tonight. AmericanMinute.com.